Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick back again to take another look at the X-Wing meta. Because during last weekend we had the Australian Nationals. Now, I went to PAX so I wasn't able to attend the Nationals, but congratulations to Irresistible Force up in Brisbane for putting on such a cool event. By all accounts it sounds like it was a fantastic tournament. So like always we're going to break down the top 16 lists and see what's going on in the X-Wing meta. Now, today's breakdown is very significant because this is one of the last major tournaments before FAQ 4.4.0 comes into effect. So it's very likely that in these lists we're going to see a lot of things that are going to get hit by the FAQ, because usually things that get hit by the FAQ are very high tier meta lists. In just over a week's time, we actually have the New Zealand Nationals being played, and that's going to happen soon after the FAQ comes into effect. So fingers crossed, someone over there in New Zealand posts up all the information on List Juggler so I can review all of that and have a look at a brand new meta. As always, I use the references from List Juggler to get all the information that you're seeing here. So click the link down below if you'd like to see that site. It's a great place that anyone that goes to any X-Wing tournament can upload the details of what went on, and it's a great way to just see what's happening with the meta as a whole. So let's move on for the data for the top 16 lists. Alright, first up, the faction breakdown. This is pretty much a continuation of what's been going on. Rebel and Scum neck and neck for top place, with the Empire lagging behind. Unfortunately, the current meta is not very kind to the Imperial faction, just with a lot of heavy auto damage and a lot of bombing. It means the lower hit point ships like TIE fighters and basically most TIE variants kind of suffer a bit. So Imperial players, watch out for what happens with this next FAQ, because I think it's really going to help the faction out a lot. Rebel had 6 lists, Scum had 7, and Imperials had 3. Even though they only had 3, it actually is a bit of an increase on the previous tournaments we've been seeing. As far as the ship sizes go, it's pretty much neck and neck. This is largely because we're seeing a lot more big ship builds that cost less and a lot of small ship builds that cost more. So it tends to even out. It's no longer a case of big ships are always more expensive and small ships are always cheap. We have 22 big ships and 23 small ships. And just moving on to the amount of ships used in each list, we had 7 3-ship builds and 7 2-ship builds. The outliers were a bit interesting though. We had a 4-ship build and we had a 6-ship build, which we'll move on to soon, but that's not a very common thing that we're seeing these days. Let's move on to the list archetypes so I can talk a bit more about that. So basically what happened at the X-Wing Oz Nationals this year was the archetypes were really open. There was a lot of experimentation. Considering we're this close to an FAQ, this is actually really interesting. Now you can see here on this chart, I put as the top by far as 2 big bounty hunters. That's not really a strict archetype. It's just basically a way of me categorizing all the stuff we're seeing here. Basically, that's any list with 2 large base Scum ships. There was Dengar Asajj, Ketsu Bosk, Dengar and this, Dengar and that, and that kind of stuff. But it's not really a strict archetype. What we saw the most of was Triple Scouts in Kanan and Co. Kanan was flown alongside Biggs and alongside Lowrick. Apart from that, we had 1 Fairship Rebels, which actually won the whole tournament. A Quad Azatuk, which I'll get onto later, which is really cool to see. Palp Defenders, Palp Aces, a Crack Swarm, which is awesome. Now, for those of you who don't know, a Crack Swarm is basically a lot of TIE fighters, mainly Black Squadron TIE fighters with the crack shot. And I'll actually bring up the list here for you guys to see, because this was a very powerful list in the meta, I want to say about a year ago, maybe a bit further back than then. And basically, it's a list that is just pure firepower, guns on ships, very powerful jousting list. And honestly, I'm very happy to see this. I know a lot of you who have played in the older meta groan like, oh, the Crack Swarm's coming back, we hated this. But honestly, I look at this list and I think, yeah, this is actually really cool. This is what X-Wing is trying to do. We also had 1 Chiweebo, again, a really cool old meta list. 1 Nimgar, as in Captain Nim and Dengar, and 1 Dash Miranda. So a lot of really cool one-offs with all these lists. I actually was really happy to see such an open field this close to an FAQ. Let's just have a quick look at what ships were flown. The most by far, again, was the Azatuk gunship. 2 of them having Lowrick, and 4 of them was the Kashyyyk Defender. A whole bunch of TIE fighters, of course. There was a Crack Swarm present, that makes perfect sense. We had 3 Lancer Pursuit Crafts, 2 Asajj and 1 Ketsu Onyo, 2 Phantoms and 2 Ghosts, both Zeb and Kanan, 2 Miranda Donis, 2 Bigs, a couple of TIE Defenders to go in that PAL Defenders list, a couple of Lambda Shuttles, a couple of YT-2400s, one of them Lebo, one of them Dash, and a whole bunch of 1-elves. What's really interesting out of all this is the bottom of this list right here, the single Skirg Bomber. This ship flew out of the gate when Wave 11 dropped, and now there's only one of them in a major top 16, which is kind of crazy. It was a ship that was really adopted quite heavily by the players as soon as Wave 11 came out, but now it seems very much that the meta has shifted across and now everyone's flying the Azatec gunship. Given the commonplace of Fairship Rebels and a lot of other things that actually use the Azatec gunship, I'm not surprised to see this. It's a great wingman to ships like Kanan or Rey. It's just a really good solid ship. And I'm actually surprised that the Skirg Bomber's actually fallen out of favour this much. Perhaps with the FAQ change it might come back into favour. It's a really, really good close-range brawler, so I don't think it gets hurt too much by this FAQ. So I'm guessing when the FAQ drops, we'll see a few less of the Lorix because of the Bigs combo will be broken, and a few more Skirg Bombers just because they're such good brawlers, and that's really what this FAQ is trying to bring back to the heart of the game. So those are the major stats of what was going on with the top 16. Now before we go on to the winning list, I just want to show you guys this. This was by Grant O'Dwyer. This is the runner-up list, and this is awesome because you look at this and basically there's no crazy combos or synergies. It's completely FAQ proof. This is just 4 Kashyyyk defenders with Wookiee commandos. And Grant, if you're watching, well done on taking this to a runner-up in a Nationals tournament. This is nuts. I don't mean that this is a bad list. Not by a long shot. This is a great list, but it doesn't rely on anything which people sort of consider broken. It doesn't get touched by the FAQ. It's just a great bare bones list. And I just want to say congratulations. This is really cool. For those of you who don't know, Wookiee Commandos is a card that actually has come through. I wasn't too sure about it when I originally reviewed the Azatec gunship, but it's just a very good light offensive boost. If you've got nothing else to spend those crew slots on, it's definitely worth the 1 point. But anyway, without further ado, let's look at the winning list. And here it is by Mr. Paul Johnson. Interestingly enough, Paul Johnson actually lives in New Zealand. So, Paul, again, if you're watching, congratulations. It is not an easy thing to go to another country and play in their meta and win a national tournament. So, big congrats for doing that. The list consists of Miranda Doney in her K-Wing with a TLT, concussion missiles, Sabine Wren, bomblet generator and long-range scanners, Biggs Darklighter with R4D6, integrated astromech, and Loric on the Azatec gunship with selflessness and Wookiee commandos. Now, it is worth noting that this list does get heavily affected by the FAQ. Basically, the combo of having Biggs and Loric here becomes a lot weaker when Biggs can only be used once a turn. Specifically this build, Loric with selflessness, you really don't want Loric getting shot in this build. And Biggs with R4D6, I mean, that just abuses the whole notion that he can get shot turn after turn and survive and survive and survive. Oh, it frustrates me to no end whenever I fly against this kind of stuff. But Miranda is pretty straightforward in this. In fact, you haven't even used Advanced Slam, which means the Miranda build here gets absolutely untouched by the FAQ change. It's also worth noting that Miranda only cost 44 points, so if you wanted to get rid of Biggs and Loric in this build, if you wanted to completely change it, it would be all too easy. You could fly it alongside a Captain Nim that's fully loaded out, or a whole heap of stuff. It's a really good, solid build, and I just think that Bomblet Generator and Sabine Wren combo is just so powerful. Interesting that you've gone for long-range scanners over Advanced Slam, but I guess points-wise, that's what you're able to fit in. Long-range scanners is interesting with this because you've got concussion missiles, which means you can take a target lock at the start of the game and then just headhunt that one ship with your concussion missiles. Do a lot of damage that way. It's not the way I fly Miranda Doney, but I guess if you want to go super aggressive, get in close and use that Bomblet Generator, it can be a very powerful combo. And of course, Biggs and Loric, there's not much to say. It's a very, very powerful combo, which is going to get broken in about a week's time. So ultimately, I feel In all honesty, if this was going to get flown after the FAQ change, it would not take a national tournament. But it's still a really cool thing nonetheless. It's a great solid build. I've flown against it several times. I've lost to it basically all of those times. It's very potent. And certainly for the next couple of days, it's something to look out for. And with that in mind, it's worth thinking about what's going to happen at this New Zealand tournament, because the winning Australian list was not FAQ proof, not by a long shot in my opinion. I will say a lot of the top 16 actually was. It's surprising how this tournament is so close to the FAQ and it had so many FAQ proof lists. But ultimately we do have to appreciate the fact that it was won by a list which is getting nerfed by the FAQ. So it'd be interesting to see at the New Zealand tournament what kind of lists get flown, what people make of this new meta, because it's really taking a lot of power away from the bombing, the auto damage, the big spare ship rebel stuff. And to me, what I feel this FAQ is doing is bringing the game back to pure jousting. Which, in my opinion, and you guys may not agree with this, you're completely entitled to your opinion, in my opinion, that is really what X-Wing should be about. It's going to mean a great big boost to the Imperial faction. It's going to mean that it's probably going to be viable again. Hopefully that means in the top 16 that at the New Zealand tournament, it's going to be roughly equal amongst all factions, but we'll see. Perfect equality between all factions is always a very hard thing to achieve, so fingers crossed, hopefully FFG got it right this time. Anyway guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, like our Facebook page, and I will catch you later.